Hello there and welcome to this course on an introduction to SQL. My name is Valentine and I'll be your instructor. In this course, we're going to be going through basic concepts in relation to SQL. SQL generally is a language that we can use to interact with data sources, more specifically data sources that are categorized as relational database management systems. If you've heard of Postgres, if you've heard of MySQL, SQL Server, Oracle, those are the kinds of databases that we work with SQL. And today's session will help you as well to be able to learn how to collect data or to retrieve data from those databases. Yeah, so let's get started. The first thing that you need to do is to visit the description section of this video and click on the resource link that should take you to a page that looks, it doesn't look like this, but it will take you to the afterwork page. Just sign in and continue learning. Just click on continue learning and you should end up on this page. But if you would be interested in practicing more how to work with SQL, you can opt to become an Afterwork member and you'll get access to a whole lot of many resources when it comes to just learning how to work with data. So yeah, so once you get here, we are going to be learning how to work with SQL in the context of MySQL. MySQL is a database management system that's supported by Oracle. It's free, it's open source, and many organizations tend to work with MySQL databases. So, but again, the idea is that you can still use SQL with maybe Postgres, you can use it with Oracle, you can also use it with SQL Server. Again, concepts will remain the same. So once we get here, the first thing that we need to do is to click on this link, MySQL client, and it will take you to this page where you will use the credentials that you find here to be able to log in. So we are going to be using a tool, an application that allows us to be able to interact with the data source, that's MySQL. When we install MySQL in a server or in a computer somewhere, normally to interact with that database management system, that's MySQL, we would need to use a separate application. It can be what is called a terminal, or in this case, we can use a web application, such as what is called PHPMyAdmin. So that's what we're going to be using for this particular case. And just click on login once you've entered the credentials. We have at Afterwork stored this instance in our servers, and the idea is just to help you be able to work with MySQL and be able to do tons of operations. So yeah, so once you have gotten here, once you have logged in, this is the user interface for PHPMyAdmin. On the left hand side, you find databases. You can think of these as bigger containers that allow us to be able to, or just containers that allow us to be able to store data and structure it in the form of tables. Like in a database, you would have multiple tables that contain records, and the records would be organized in rows and columns, like just a tabular structure. So our focus will be learning how to work with SQL, and you can click on the first link. So the first database, that's written Healthcare Day 1. Depending on when you watch this video, you might find there are more databases, and then we can now be able to see that inside this database we have two tables. We have hospitals and patients, and it's still the same ones here. And at the very top there are just a few tabs that we can use to perform just various database management systems operations when it comes to just working with MySQL. Our concern will be on this particular tab, so SQL. This is where we're going to be writing code, SQL code that we can be able to execute and retrieve the data that we need. So, and yeah, so let me just zoom in a bit and so that we can go through a few things. Okay. Right, so starting off, we'll start off with the first concept. So the set of concepts that we're going to be learning are basic selection operations. Then we'll get to learn about filtering, sorting, limiting, aggregating, and just a few additional ones. So starting off, we'll get to learn about basic selection operations. And in this section, we'll learn more specifically how to retrieve data from one or more columns from a table. And we'll use the select keyword to be able to select the data that we want. So let's go through select all records from a table. So starting off, if we want to select data from a table, we would need to use the select keyword, and then we specify the columns that we want to select. So here we are specifying all the columns. So when we say select star from patients, we are saying we want to select all columns, but then we define the table that we want using the from keyword. So select star from patients. This is the name of the table, and it has to be as exact. Normally, when we are writing SQL statements, we would need to include some sort of semicolon at the end. It's good practice, but you will see when you run code on phpMyAdmin, you don't have that as an option. But yeah, so you can copy this and then paste it in this section, and just run by going to the far right. Just click run, and we're going to get the records that are from this patients table, as you can see. So this operation is useful when we want to select records, all the records from a table. So we specify all the records as well as all the columns. We don't have anything else in this statement. So the code itself, it's actually a statement. So we say select all columns from patient records. So this is what we get. Okay. There's a challenge, and we've only done this for the first section, so you can work on this challenge. So write an SQL query to retrieve all records from the hospitals table. So you can pause the video and then do that. Then once you're done, then we'll continue. All right, moving on. So the next thing that we're going to learn is how to select all records in specific columns. So in some situations, we might want to select maybe the first name column and the last name column. And as you can see here, we have multiple columns. We have quite a number of columns. And if our research problem only requires just specific columns, that is something that we would need to just select the specific columns that we need. So in our case, in this case, we would want to select the first name and the last name instead of using the asterisk. So we say from patients, just be able to select that from the patients table. I've copied that and I will paste it. So over here, you can click on edit inline so that you're not taken back to the original page. So if I click on edit, I will be taken back to the original editor, but I don't want. Just click on edit inline. So click on there, and you should be able to see what you see here. So you can paste, select first name and last name from patients, and that's what we need to run. So click on go, and you should be able to see the columns have been selected. We're good. All right, I hope we're doing well. By the way, if you want to export this data, you'd need to go to the very bottom and say export, and then choose the format that you want to export. If it's CSV, and that's normally that's normally it, and you just say go, and it will just download the CSV format. Let me go back to SQL. Had selected. Okay, so our previous command was that. Let me go back. But yeah, so this is the table. That's the data that we have. All right. Moving on. Pause the video, by the way, and we'll work on this challenge. So obtain a list of hospital names along with their location types. Again, if you want to learn more and go through the challenges, and there are also solutions for that, be sure to think about becoming an Afterwork member. You'll get all the resources for that. 1.3. So moving on. So we might want to select all records in specific columns and give that column a specific alias. So in the case where we had selected first name and last name, maybe we might want a new name for those columns, such as F name and L name for just the first name as well as last name respectively. We could decide to define those column names, those new names, but then we use the as. So we first of all define first name, then we say as F name. So the output would have this new name, last name as L name, so from patient. So essentially this operation where that we are performing here would give us an output that has new column names. Right, copy that and then paste, click on editing line, replace what you had with this new one, and then just click on go. I won't check for any key checks. We don't have any, but yeah, you can always uncheck that. You can always, it doesn't matter for this case. So this should give us a column, the columns, F name and last name. So the original names have been replaced. And you can again download it and do some work on that. Right, pause the video and then work on the challenge. Yeah, so just work on the challenge. Okay. Just wanted to see whether I can be able to zoom in on this case, but yep. I think that's okay. Okay. Work on the challenge that you see here. All right, moving on. So that's the first section. We can move on to filtering. So filtering allows us to be able to narrow down on the results of a query. So if we would only want to work with a subset of data, then we can use filtering to be able to do that. So let's first of all go through this first concept. So assuming we wanted to check, we wanted to filter for records, all the records from the patient's table where gender column is equals to F. F is just the text. So we enclose it in quotes. So in such a situation, we just add this particular section onto a code, onto our statement. So we use the where clause. It's called a where clause, where capital normally. You can use also underscore. The only difference is that standards just say that you just have your keywords in capital or clauses. So where gender, the gender column is equal to F, and that's what we should get. So we want just a table that contains information about patients who are female. So editing line, paste that and then run that. And you can see these records, the gender has F. And again, I mentioned to you, you can always export your data by visiting the very bottom. So clicking on export, and you can export that data if you need to export it. Let me go back. You can export that data. Let me just go to SQL, paste my command again, go, and I should be able to get that. Okay. Moving on, so 2.1, 2.2. In some other situations, we might want multiple conditions. So I had defined where gender is F, but I can also include another condition. I can state and use and. This, I could decide to also have gender at the very beginning, but you could always check. You could always just define both conditions after the where clause. So where, then department equal to pulmonology and gender is equals to F. So all the records that we are going to be getting will have these as true. So if I copy this, then I change this, I paste it here. I should be able to get that. And you can also structure your queries depending on the research problem at hand. Okay, all right, so that's just about it. Let's move on to 2.3. Okay, so in some other situations, we might want to check for either of the conditions, whether they are true. So instead of using and, we might want to use or. So to just check if this particular statement is, this particular condition is true, I still want those records. Or if this condition is also true, I would also want those records. So yeah, so let's, we actually define that using the or operator. So you can just copy that and just paste that, and you should be able to see records from sales. Now this is okay. Okay, right. This is okay. This is sales. I had put this as sales, but you can change that. Let's do the previous 2.2. Let's copy that 2.2 and just use or instead of and. Just use or. So yeah, just run that. I realize I don't have sales in this data. So yeah, but yeah, so you can see what you have. So you have the records here. Pulmonary department could be the pulmonary, or gender is F. So if you have gender as M, it means that the department has to be pulmonary. Okay, I hope you have understood the idea behind that. All right, let's move on to 2.4. So we might want to select records using not equal to. So in some situations, we might want to select maybe patients or patients where the department is not hematology, so the other patients, and we use the not equal to operator. It's just less than and greater than signs put together. So you just click on copy and then run this. And you should be able to see that these are records where the department column is not equal to hematology. All right. Okay, let's move on. Remember, you could always practice more with just membership. You get the resource for that. 2.5. So in some situations where we might want to maybe just collect data that is just has some null values, then we can do that as well. So we can select all the records where now we can specify the column that has missing values, and we say discharge, let's say, is null. So in any case where there is missing value in there's a missing value in the discharge date column, then we'll get the record itself. So let's copy this, editing line, paste this, and say go. In this case, we don't have any, so means that we are good. We don't have any records. You can always use this just for checking for even whether they're missing values in your column, in any column that you want. All right, let's move on to non-null values. If you want to get the inverse, so the inverse of is not null, so you could always do that. So is null, so you could, instead of saying is null, you can say is not null, and just go that. Just change what you had earlier, and you can have all the records that you had. But again, let's copy this other column. So this code and paste it so that you can be able to see that effect. So is this for this particular column, admission date, we want to see whether we actually will get records with values for that admission date column. So here we go. All right, 2.7. So in some other situations, we might want to select data where maybe the columns have values between a certain range. Like for example, might want to select our records from the patients table where the date of birth column has values between this particular value and also this particular value. So we use date of birth and the name of the column, then between keyword, so between and also and. So that's what we use in this particular case, and this should give us records with the range between here and this value, inclusive of the 2 dates. So if we run this, copy that, change it, and paste that. And you can apply, by the way, this to just different columns as well, even numerical ones, which work better. So you can see our records here have dates between, actually from January, but the record starts from September to December, but you could always specify what you want. Feel free to change that, to update that, and see the effect. Right, moving on, 2.8, we might want maybe to select maybe records with specific values. So initially we had used, so if I go back a bit, just back a bit, when we were specifying one condition, use the equals operators that you see here to specify for whether we want to specify the condition, but we can decide to check for whether we have values, multiple values across multiple conditions, using the approach that we see here. So we can select from we can select our records from patients where department, we use the in keyword, then parentheses, cardiology and hematology. So we would want for all patient records where the department is either cardiology or hematology. So this is another way. So if you have, instead of writing multiple conditions, you can just be able to define that. So let's update that and see. Go. So we should be able to see that cardiology, hematology, so etc. So that's what we have here. Awesome. Let's move on to 2.9, or should be good. Okay, we're good. So we're done with that section for just filtering. That should help us be able to answer specific research questions that require just a subset of data. So moving on, we will move to sorting. So once you have your data, or even while you are, should I put it this? When you are selecting data, you can also define how you want the data to be sorted. So for instance, you might want the data to be sorted in ascending order. So let's learn how to do that. So assuming that we wanted to select all records from patients, we can define that we want to select them, but again, we want to order them using the order clause by date of birth. Then we specify in ascending ASC to say that we want to specify that we want to get the records in ascending order. That should give us the records in ascending order. Descending, it's usually DESC, but we get to learn that. So copy this and note about how the records will be displayed as per the date of birth. Editing line. Go this, go. So these are the records, but when we look at the date of birth, where's the date of birth? This is the date of birth. Should be in ascending, so 1960, 64, 65, 65, 66, 67, etc. All right, awesome. So yeah, so that's just a bit about that. 3.2 in descending order. So we can decide to use DESC in descending. So let's update this. Okay, you can just even copy this again, paste it. We are going to do now for admission date, get the records in arranged in descending order as per the admission date. So when you look at this, you can see that admission date starts from 2025, it goes down. This is 7th, 4th, 1st, 28th of January, 21st, etc. So I think you get the idea there. All right, so moving on. So that's 3.2. So assuming that in some situations you might want to order by multiple columns. So first of all, you might want maybe to order by department in ascending order, and then later order the records by admission date in descending order. So let's see how you can do that. But again, this takes into account of the fact that you want these the data to be ordered by multiple columns, not just that the result of what you have here is what also is arranged again. No, so you'll find the records in the department column being now ordered in admission date, but again, you'll note also that the entire data set has already been ordered by department. So let's copy this and display this. So if you look closely, select star from patients, order by department. So when you look closely in your data set, you might see this is patient table, and we're ordering first of all by department. So we start C, then E. So this is ordered, but again, we want to order the ones in C in each and every category by admission date. So when you look at admission date, see in descending order, it's 2025 up until 2024, the first date of July. So that is something that you can be able to do as well. All right, you can pause the video, do that task, and then we can continue. Moving on, in some situations, we might not want to return all the records. So we might want to just return maybe the first few records, maybe 3 records, just get to see what the table contains in terms of records. So we can say select star or columns from patients and limit 3. Limit keyword just ensures that we just get the first 3, the first records that we've defined, and we specify the number of records. So we'll get 3 records if we run this code. So the first 3 in that situation. And that's what we can do. And this is important, especially when you ask questions such as maybe what was the top 3 or the bottom 3 or highest 3 or highest 5 or highest 10, top 10, or something of that sort. Then you can use SQL for that. Run that code and note the change. All right, moving on. In some situations, you might want to select records with a limit and an offset. So to explain the offset concept much more clearly, you'll note that when we say that we want to limit the records, we get from record 1, 2, 3. But in some situations, maybe you want to get the same records, number of records are 1, 2, 3, but from a starting point, maybe from record 10. So you could get 11, 12, 13. So that's where just offset comes in. So in this case, we are selecting all records from patient's data and getting 3 records. We're limiting 3 records, but then we want to start off from position, from the second record. So we'll get 3, 4, 5. So this just offsets. It just means that you start from a particular point while you're selecting your data. So if we run this, we should get records from patient's table, and they'll start from 3, 4, 5. So if you run this, you should be able to see 3, 4, 5. So we are offsetting our starting point. All right, pause the video, then work on the challenge if you have. But again, I think that if you've understood the concept, we can continue. Okay, so the last few records. So if you wanted to select the last few records, there isn't a dedicated keyword for that. Or what you can do is just order the data, say by patient ID, if you want to get the last records based on patient ID or the unique identifier, and then you arrange the records in, you sort the records in, by the way, in descending order, is part of the patient ID, and then you limit the 3 ones that you want. So in this case, we'll get the last 3 records, and yeah, from this table. Again, this is based on the patient ID. All right, moving on. That's limiting records. We're done. We are moving on to aggregation and grouping. So this particular section entails creating pivot tables. So we might want to maybe create a pivot table, and a pivot table is just a smaller table to a bigger table. So if you wanted maybe to create a pivot table that has department and the number of and the number of patients for each department, we can specify that by simply writing our SQL statement. We say select, then we define what we want on the left hand side of the summary table, which is department. Then we specify here we want to count all the records, department, then count all the records. So now this is going to be on the right hand side of our pivot table. The values that we're going to get there will be the count of all the records per department from patients, and then we say group by the column that we want to group by. So this just ensures that we get the output that we've defined here. So yeah, so run that and go. And here you should see that we have cardiology, and those are the departments and the number of patients. And you can again export this data and use it to create maybe a pivot table or just a simple table or even just a visualization using other software. Awesome. So I think we've gotten there. So we can move on to the next one. So, but the others are not so much different from what we have covered so far. You can see that, say, I think we've gone through count aggregate function, which you can check, but we can use maybe, instead of having count, you can decide maybe to get the minimum value, so department, and the minimum admission date. So you can get the minimum value for each group within that department, within that category for this. And we can save actually this value, the column value is now earliest admission, so that we're able to see, like, what was the earliest admission per date for each department. And that could also help in answering some research problems. Like, for example, it could help the management know what to invest in, what to put up, maybe when they're putting up the next hospital or the next facility. Yeah, so let's copy that and paste that command. It's almost the same, it's only that we are just changing the minimum operation, and here we are getting the outcome. So you can see that the first admission for cardiology happened on this date, which is the first particular date. The same, the next admission happened for this date, and the other, I think the last one was gastroenterology, happened on the 25th of July. It happened quite late. So yeah, all right. And you can do that with just different aggregate functions. I'll leave that to you. to do that. You can check for count and also for marks, and you can also test for sum, SUM. Lastly, sometimes you might want to, just going through the last section, we might want to select distinct values from a column. So if we have this column, we want to get just the distinct values, we can just use the distinct keyword. So select distinct and the column name, then from patients, and that should give us that. So yeah, let's run that and you should be able to get the output, which is, these are the distinct column, these distinct values in that column. So yeah, so that's it. For today's session. It was meant to be just a session that introduces you to how to collect data. And once you've collected data, as we've mentioned, you can always just go to the very bottom, click on export, and then you can export it. And I hope this just allows you to learn how to work with SQL. If you want more challenges, be sure to become an Afterwork member. And considering that this is a series, there are four days of this particular course. So feel free to watch out for the next course, which still will be a bit more technical. So for the next one, we're going to be doing joining tables. So learning how to use what are called inner joins, outer joins, etc. And yeah, it will be also another useful session, maybe that might be important in the problems that you might be tackling when it comes to SQL. All the best in your learning journey. If you found this resource useful, be sure to give it a thumbs up. And if you'd want to be informed when we post such future learning resources, be sure to subscribe, and see you in the next learning experience. Bye bye.